Hi, I'm Gia Mills, and I've been a celebrity makeup artist for the past 20 years. I'm also fascinated by the power of makeup and the incredibleness of beauty politics. On True Reflections, you get to peek behind the curtain and find out what your favorite celebrities really feel about their appearance when the glare of the media is upon them. So, who is with me today? My guest today represented us at Eurovision, played one half of the best sister duo in EastEnders, and has appeared in many musicals ever since. But this time, she's going on tour in a straight play, Dear England, around the UK until March. It's mum of two, Samantha Womack. Thank you so much.
Hi,
Hello, welcome. So,
thanks for having me.
so you have joined us. You are having a slight break from rehearsals, but you are sort of knee deep in about to start launching a play.
Yes, yeah, it's a play which primarily seems like it's about football, but actually it's not. It's about kind of human behavior and the culture of performance and fear and toxic masculinity and pressures. It's really human. It's a human story, and I play an amazing woman um, who is a real live person called Pippa Grange, who was actually recruited by Gareth Southgate when he wanted to try and kind of change the culture of football, particularly for the players themselves, because he knew only too well the pressures of kind of penalty taking, being a young player, what winning and losing means, not just to yourself and your teammates, but to the public,
Mm.
the kind of worries of England on your very young shoulders and how to deal with those pressures. And there wasn't actually a lot in place for players back when Gareth Southgate took his penalty for England. And
I remember that goal. I remember that, well, not a goal when he did the penalty, and
yeah,
he really got slated by the media. So if anyone knows about the pressures and what can go wrong, I guess that's him.
absolutely. And I think the media then were probably more brutal in the kind of the 90s and early 2000s. Certainly this kind of hero worshipping culture, which then very quickly could turn to being a villain.
Mm.
And obviously, that's a great story and it sells great copy, but for the individual involved, can be really, really traumatic. And also, then that inherited trauma of that story gets passed down through the players over the generations, and they don't understand why they feel this fear and this pressure, but actually they are inheriting a kind of collective trauma. And so
Well,
Pippa Gray,
anyone who knows anything about English football know that when it's anyone says penalties and World Cup, we all break out into slightly cold sweats. So it seems, you know, I guess working out a way to try and combat this. And so is that what happens in the play? Is that what you explore? Is that what your character's trying to help with?
yes, so Pippa Grange was a performance psychologist and she got her doctorate in Australia, and she then was affiliated with kind of Olympic teams and national football teams and rugby, and then was approached by Gareth Southgate when she was actually in a transition to become more of a kind of culture coach rather than being focused on individual performers. She was, as it says in the play, she was trying to transform the culture of a place. And so she was understandably dubious about the England, football team with the pressures that come with that. But I think she and Gareth, their work seemed pretty aligned in terms of how they wanted to help transform that culture. And I think they kind of met each other at the right time. And she had a profound effect on how we were dealing with the psychology of those players. And some of those practices have actually been inherited and moved forward. And Gareth then went on to break that penalty curse between England and Russia. And it was the first time they won on penalties. And that was really a huge kind of, well, for me, a very moving thing that it was Gareth that was championing that change
Yeah.
with the help of Pippa. So I'm hugely interested in her work and her as a woman and the kind of work that she's done. Um,
Have you sort of, I guess you've learned some of the tactics because it is a whole, there's always, people always talk about sports psychology as a sort of the kind of like top end of the sort of psychology, performance psychology. Because if you can deliver under pressure,
mm.
you're, a match point or, a penalty. Did you take some of the learnings have you managed to kind of go, oh, that's good, I might try that in real life?
Actually, yes. And she, for me personally, I had a kind of health scare a couple of years ago, and I took some time out because I just wanted to really process what was happening to me, but not in a kind of I didn't need it because I was scared. I actually wanted to understand the changes that were happening to me in my life at that point, and also some of the
Are we allowed to mention you had a cancer? Cancer.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm a real advocate of speaking about it. Breast cancer is something that affects so many women now, particularly women before their mammograms are called at 50. You know, we're having to be far more astute actually as women, and understanding how to check ourselves, and actually just the number of breast cancer cases that are on the rise.
You talk,
And so
you talk about it beautifully, actually. I saw the Loose Women about 2 years ago you did, and you just talk. It's just so refreshing hearing someone talk about it in such a frank, warm, honest way. So thank you for, being open about it all, because the more people that understand, I guess, the better that people can talk about the challenges. But sorry, carry on the point about how your character, how Pippa, what you learned from her and how that helped you when during your cancer journey.
took this time off to kind of work out what I felt about myself, my health, my life. And I was really careful about the job that I came back with, because I I didn't want to kind of launch straight into a kind of high octane, either a musical theatre performance or a heavy filming schedule. I was looking for something that felt cathartic for me. So it was still a kind of a character, but that character was going to ease me gently back into, the world of acting and pretending to be someone else, because that's quite it's quite distracting when you've just spent a year trying to become yourself, and then immediately you're launched into being somebody else. And so I was being really careful. And Pippa Grange, this character, came along, and honestly, for me at the time, just felt like this really helpful vessel, somebody who has had some of the same challenges in her life that I've had, but also someone who is very measured and very calm, and really looking into what it means to face yourself, what it means to face fear. And so it felt like a really great person for me to try and inhabit as my kind of first journey back into what can sometimes be quite a daunting profession. And I'm finding that, she's teaching me so much, and it's subject matter that feels very relevant for me at this point in my life.
I guess,
um
I guess when you play different characters, I hadn't actually thought about it in such detail, in such
mm,
a way. But I guess, when you were in EastEnders playing Ronnie, she's a really like, there's that sort of aggression, and there's sort of like the whole EastEnders, it's got that kind of tempo. And if you've just come out of having a year of healing from cancer, actually try, if you were to go back into something like that sort of character, that's quite exhausting, and you really do absorb the energy of the character, I guess. So actually having someone who's more placid and calm probably is much more healing.
It's true. I mean, often women talk primarily about their recovery from cancer and wanting to be a kind of good cancer patient, as we tend to, as women, we want to take as take up as little space as possible because we're looking after others.
Mhm.
That's what we do so brilliantly. And so my primary mistake after the recovery that I went through was going straight back to a job which was fabulous, and it felt celebratory. It was a musical, 42nd Street, and I was so excited to be kind of well and going back. But of course, I hadn't processed my own, and this actually will tie into your themes of self and beauty. And when you go through something that can be quite disfiguring, not just physically but emotionally, like
Yeah.
cancer, your body is being dissected, it's being taken apart, you're losing your hair, you're losing parts of your body that feel very intimate, and your sense of self and your sense of beauty and confidence changes dramatically. And of course, I then went straight into this very sensual, glamorous character, and I was front stage and forward in a kind of gold sparkly dress and singing, and it was just too much for me. It was my anxiety at that point. I hadn't worked out how to feel confident or beautiful or powerful as me yet. And straight away, I was expecting my body and brain to be able to inhabit this vivacious, quite sensual character. And it was too much. And I had real difficulty in just feeling that character. I was rejecting it the whole time. And
That's
so,
so, because you as a person, I think, you spent a lot of time in a very glamorous place on in telly. And so it suddenly something that was so familiar to you just felt so alien. And I
mm,
think what's really interesting, I watched your Eurovision contest, your little bit of footage, which I
sorry about that.
absolutely brilliant. Anyone who it's just so charming. And I think you were, and still are a very attractive lady. And when you're young, that whole identity of one it's what it's all about. And I think so. How did you, when you were young, how did you feel about your appearance? Was it always something that you were confident in yourself, or has it taken time to step into who you are?
I think I was always battling it feeling reductive. I think I was always battling in feeling, I mean, I had very low self-esteem as a young woman, just based on kind of childhood trauma and things like that. So I was struggling to get a sense of myself. And the problem with people being very complimentary sometimes about the way you look, but it does become reductive because you, in fact, start to believe that that's all you have to offer.
Mm.
And I think I had a sense of kind of shame in wanting to live up to that primarily, but also trying to find my feet in another area, which wasn't always to do with that. And I felt like,
Acting.
well, just being me, I suppose,
Mm.
people commenting on me and what it was like to meet me instead of normally the first few lines of an interview or paragraph would always be, oh, here she comes, those wonderful cheekbones, or the beauty. And we have all those adages, don't we, of young women before we introduce them, and they can appear really great and complimentary, but I think for someone who's struggling to work out who they are, you start to believe that that's all there is. And so your version of self and the vanity that you then start to have because you're trying to hold on to the one valuable asset that you think you have, that became very apparent to me during my journey with breast cancer, when I was losing my hair, when I was losing parts of my body, and just having to face what I valued about myself at that time, because I was losing all the things that people had valued about me. And sorry, I'll get quite emotional talking about this, because actually it was the most transformative period of my life, because it enabled me to step out of a box, a prison that I'd kind of put myself in. I
Mm.
allowed myself to kind of venture out of that space.
But it's challenging, isn't it? It's really, I'm doing a lot of kind of meditation and Buddhist stuff at the moment, and it's really leaning in to that, into your fears, into the, really looking inside and looking the rawness, what's in there, and not this societal like pressures, particularly if you're in the public eye like you have been, to look a certain way. And it must have been a challenge and then a revelation, I guess.
Yeah, I think the more people, humans, male, female, we are also individual, like our thumbprints. Every part of us is physical, it's ancestral inheritance, it's childhoods, and we become these kind of versions of ourselves, which are kind of pre-programmed with data, lots and lots of data. And I think, having spoken to lots of people about these feelings that we have of inadequacy, or who we are, or whatever they might be because of, it's really interesting to me that we all have them, and that's our common ground. We are, as humans, desperate desperately trying to fit in, desperately trying to be liked, to be validated. And that's pretty difficult in a world which its value systems are to do with success and whatever they may mean, whether it's physical, whether it's financial, it's class, ethnicity, sex, we have these things that are pre-mapped out for us, and we try and find our value somewhere
Mm.
in that graph. And we're all the same. It doesn't matter who you speak to. That's the refreshing thing about it, is that we all share these commonalities of feelings of insecurity. And so getting older, the beauty of that, I hope, is that exactly as you said, you lean into the places that you're most uncomfortable,
Yeah.
the places that you start to kind of tense up and feel that anxiety. I think for me personally, leaning into those have been the keys for me to actually go, let's not avoid those now, let's lean into them, work out what it is. And suddenly beauty happens, these walls start to kind of fall down and you go,
Well,
interesting,
it's
I've just put
freedom.
myself in a prison.
I know it's freedom. And, someone like Pamela Anderson, for example, like, it seems like she's gone on a certain journey like that. It's like, my identity was this. It was the glamour, overly sexualized, glamorous woman who was very objectified. And now she's rejected that. And it's so refreshing to see that she's just taking ownership of who she really is. And I look at her as a makeup artist and go, I just like to put a tiny bit of makeup there or a bit there, and that's missing the whole point, because I'm just trying to look at it from an aesthetic object point of view. But actually what I think is really beautiful is what she's doing is she's great for our generation to give us confidence. And I also think there's another thing, what every woman I think I have interviewed, and I've done about 30 now, there's not one woman, I don't think, who said that they have felt confident as a woman in their appearance as a teenager. And it's like, how do we get women to feel better about themselves as a teenager? What would be your thoughts on how to kind of make women feel a bit better?
Well, I have a 30-year-old stepson, a 24-year-old firstborn son, and a 20-year-old female, and they're all struggling with identity in different ways. But I do agree, being a mother of a daughter who her main pressures, societal pressures, as grounded and level-headed as Lily is, and she really is, for a 20-year-old, much more so than I was. There is just this incredible pressure now. The standards, the filters, the kind of ways that you can change your appearance are really dangerous. And often it's women doing it to ourselves. It often tends to be lots of female editors and these kind of body shaming and circles around the bit of our
Yeah.
body with crosses against them.
Did you ever get that? Did you ever have that done to
The
you?
90s were full of those. I mean, the 90s were full of, have you got a story about this person, will pay good money? So, that was an incentive for people to kind of talk about your life, either truthfully or not truthfully. And then you would also have, yes, kind of, here's a list of your favorite celebrities. What parts do you think are a cross and what parts do you think are a tick? And you just think, oh, the brutality of that. And now with social media, I mean, there's a whole other world of shaming that goes on. And so I don't know how we avoid it. I do think that we talk about it a lot more. I mean, podcasts like this, we're exploring, we're having women listen to other women about what we really feel. I think that's the beauty of the internet. The more we can talk about it, the better. But I don't know. I mean, it's taken me a long time to feel comfortable in my own skin. And my daughter and I talk about it all the time. And it's a constant source of interest for me and her. And I'm very glad we have each other to talk to, because she's a whole different experience.
It is
She's
it's like they're in a different planet, that a generation, because we can't really, I find it really hard to really know what it feels like to be in that world with the social media, and it's so different for us to be able to empathize.
It's true. It's true. And I don't think we could ever fully understand the ramifications of that, not having lived through that generation, in the same way that I think we're not going to fully understand post-COVID symptoms. And I don't mean physical, I mean emotional, and what that did to us as a
Mm.
society. I don't think we'll fully understand that until later, because again, we were all feeling terrified by the medical aspects of COVID, but there was also this kind of evening out of people. We were all the same at that period, and I've spoken to a lot of people now who've had almost a kind of post-COVID depression of saying, I understand it was really awful and there were so many deaths and health problems, but there was also this kind of feeling for a lot of people that the capitalist world disappeared and we all became kind of free of those pressures. And so, yeah, it's all very interesting.
Didn't matter how rich you were, you still pretty much everyone had to do the same thing, and it was a beautiful thing because it just evened out humanity, which was it was kind of amazing. And I think it will be very interesting how we sort of move into that. Leaning a bit more into sort of the beauty world, because and talking about teens. So you when you were young, you know you were a party girl quite young, going out having fun, and you were doing glamour shoots when you were very young. Is that something you talk to your daughter about and sort of say, this is what I did and the journey, and that was relevant for the time? How do you navigate that with her now?
Well, interestingly, the narrative of, so yes, at that time, the 90s, Ladette culture was very much synonymous with the sporting world, actually. There was a kind of strange phenomenon that took place where it was part of, Spice Girls and girl power, girls doing photo shoots that were still incredibly sexual, but kind of under the guise of we're owning it. And yet they were still male publications and they were still selling sex as an idea. And so I did one photo shoot for FHM, because at that time I was probably 20, 21, something like that.
Were
And
you on EastEnders at that point?
no, way before. This was just after, it would have just been after kind of either Game On or Eurovision. It was in that period.
Okay.
And it was almost kind of, the narrative became wild child Sam. We always were wild child. And I mean, the truth was, it just wasn't me. I mean, I left home at 15 and I worked immediately. Immediately I went to work. So I went to work in, well, I had 3 or 4 different jobs. And then I went very early into kind of singing and performing. So I never had any time to be wild child, but it was almost like that was the image that you tried to cultivate through the help of the tabloids, of like, wild child Sam, she's just up for it, look at her here in this. And so you went along with that because you were kind of almost I suppose dragged along with the fervor of it all.
Mm.
But I look back on that and I go, who is that person? I mean, I don't recognize those images as being synonymous with me.
Mm.
I also remember being really uncomfortable and anxious about doing those kind of shoots and hugely embarrassed about them afterwards. And even as an older woman, I now look at them, and often I'm at stage door or something, and somebody will immediately present these images of this photo shoot, and I just find it really difficult because it feels like somebody that was fabricated in order to sell
You had to do
stories.
it. You had to do it in order. That was the nature of the game, I guess, at the time, that you had to be with that whole, those are the rules. How did it, when you then went to EastEnders, how did you feel when you went on the show? Because I loved your character so much in that. Did you feel pressure in that as well? Was it was it better at that point?
Yes, I have to say, creatively, I really love that job because there is something about the way my brain works. A repetition and moving slowly, I find quite difficult. I like to work when I'm fully engaged, and something about being in soap where you're pacing through monologues and storylines and just feeling so creatively stimulated throughout the day, as opposed to doing something like Kingsman for a kind of big Hollywood film, huge budget, but the time that it takes to
Mm.
replicate each scene, I just found very difficult. So I really loved it creatively. I think what I hadn't been prepared for, because I was already, I thought, quite well known. I wasn't prepared for the difference of actually being in people's living rooms 4 times a week, because you become part of people's kind of household experience and they feel very strongly and passionately about you. And that was something that I had to kind of get used to, going, gosh, I thought I was kind of recognized, but there was nothing quite like that soap recognition. But I still get it now. And actually people were really they were really behind that character and her pain and her trauma. And I still get, I mean, even the other day after rehearsals, I was walking down the South Bank and this young lad just kind of stopped his bike and was just, oh my goodness, I just love your character. And he was so passionate about it. And I was thinking, well, that was like 7, 8 years ago, so she really did hit a place with people. So I'm very proud of that.
I thought she was an absolutely fabulous character, and obviously you died in it. Is it annoying that everyone always asks you, "Are you going to go back again? Are you going to come like in Hollyoaks? A guy came back as his died, but came back as his brother." Would you, is it annoying when everyone asks that question?
It doesn't annoy me at all. I mean, it does make me laugh at the kind of mediums of soap or theatre. I mean, soap really started, Victoria Wood always said, soap really started as a reflection of kind of real life. It was about people that parked their bicycles in the hallway, just like us, coming out of a kind of glamorous Hollywood era. And it's really changed, hasn't it, over the decades of kind of now, there's deaths and, all kinds of trauma, on a weekly basis. And can she be brought back from the dead? It makes me smile at how that medium has changed, but also, it's also very flattering that people still will go to any lengths to the idea to kind of get her
Yeah, I
back.
think, well, it is, because it's flattering. It is flattering, I think, because it's like people would probably love to see you back on it, but it's like you've moved on and there's new things that you want to get into. But I guess you made some great, those sort of things are fantastic. So you make really good friends, you get to know people, because the brilliant, Barbara Windsor, how is it working with her? Because she was such a character.
She really was. And because Barbara had her experience of theatre, musical theatre as well, she was a huge lover of musical theatre and really was a champion for me. She'd come along and see me at South Pacific or Guys and Dolls. They were often parts that she'd done. She played Adelaide in Guys and Dolls, and I was doing it with Patrick Swayze, Jamie Lloyd,
Were
and
you?
yes, Jamie Lloyd and Michael Grandich. I mean, Jamie Lloyd was younger then and working kind of alongside Michael Grandich, but it was this incredible creative team. We did it at the Piccadilly Theatre. It was that first time I really got a sense of kind of what good musical theatre is like and how it can take hold if the story's told properly. And Barbara was such a fan of that. She'd come to all of those things for me and text me in my dressing room while she was sitting in the auditorium waiting, and we shared that. And Barbara was just an incredible professional performer. She sustained a career from, again, transforming from a very sexualized young woman, the carry-on culture, all of that stuff at the time, which was deemed as cool, and then having to understand how culturally that kind of changed, and she shifted with those changes, which is a real feat, to constantly evolve as a woman and be allowed to leave that stall, and then move into the kind of iconic woman that she became in EastEnders. I mean, that just is incredible. It's an incredible survival skill.
Allowing herself to age as well, because again, part of, from my viewpoint on beauty, etc., it's like it's such a challenge as one's getting older. I'm 51, and it's
Yeah.
like your persona changes. Like when you have cancer, some people get to, go through chemotherapy, you lose your hair, you lose your identity. As you get older, your hair changes, your appearance changes, and who you were really changes. And I think it's difficult to cope with all of that. And it's lovely having someone like her to look to see, gosh, she was so like unapologetic And
Yeah, and June Brown, who played Dot. I mean, I was a huge fan of her as well. This woman who had started her career in theatre, 5 children, would be touring with her children in the dressing room. We often talked about that, and Ronnie and Dot, developed quite a strong relationship on the show, as did June and I. She was a real advocate of my character and was very protective, actually, of the character. She often rewrote things because she didn't want people to misunderstand Ronnie, which I was very moved by. She didn't want her to be demonized, because she felt passionately about her, and I was always very grateful for that. But more importantly, again, just this incredible woman who knew until her last days on the show every detail of every family that was there.
mm,
We often can marginalize people who are older and kind of, oh, we it becomes reductive again. We talk down to them. And actually, June, as a professional woman, I defy anyone to have understood the culture of that show quite as well as she did. She remembered details that she would say, it's important for us to get right. Otherwise, we underestimate our audience. They remember the details, and so should we. So
mm.
she would often, spend time talking to the directors or the performers, saying, it's just a teapot to you, but to that family, it means everything. And I was always very behind that. She was fighting for the whole show all the time. And I thought that was really impressive.
Yeah, and so finally going back to Dear England and going full circle, like going back to the stage, and tell me where we can find the show, tell me how long it's running for, and how people can watch it, because I think it sounds like such a compelling show that's not just for people who like football.
Yes, it's a human interest story with lots of highs and lows. It's very moving. So it's the National Theatre's award-winning production. So we must say that it was at the National Theatre and then it went into the West End. And we've now got the privilege of taking it to other parts of the country, which sometimes don't get the kind of theatre that we're making in London. And so I feel very passionately about that. And we start our tour in September, and it continues right through until the next year. So if you go online and search the Dear England tour, you'll find out which theatre it's in near you.
So a massive thank you to Samantha Womack. To get tickets to see Dear England, visit www.dearenglandonstage.com. That's me for this week for True Reflections. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. You can find me across your social media by searching at True Reflections Podcast. You can also explore my Skin and Motion cosmetics range to help boost your confidence at skin.in.motion on your social media channels. I will be back next week with another celebrity to talk through their beauty experiences, their favourite products, and delve deeper into how the ideals of beauty shapes not just our physical appearance, but the core of our identities. Until then, have a lovely week.